It's been 2 years. 2 years of bloodshed, of bombings, and 2 years in which the Gaza Strip has become the most devastated place on earth in terms of loss of life, loss of property, loss of social infrastructure. And this week, the unthinkable happened. A quiet, tentative peace has fallen over the Gaza Strip as Hamas has released the last remaining hostages and Israel has freed 2,000 Palestinians who are being held in their prisons. This is a ceasefire brokered by none other than Donald Trump that's coming to effect. Trump calls it, and I'm quoting, a tremendous day for the Middle East as Gaza struggles to now breathe under the rubble. Many are asking, is this really a dawn of peace, or is it a new form of colonialism that's taking effect? That's the answer that we're going to be looking for in this video, and we'll unpack almost everything that's happened in the last 1 week. Remember, like, share, subscribe, and sign up for our membership. Let's first take a look at what has happened. Now, under the first phase of Trump's brokered deal, Israeli troops have withdrawn from parts of Gaza, allowing hundreds and thousands of displaced Palestinians to finally return home. But what does home look like? It looks like a rubble. It looks like damaged buildings. A lot of them are perhaps unsafe for people to live in, right? We don't know when they will fall. There's also a lot of unexploded munition under that rubble and a lot of loved ones that are buried under the rubble as well. Hamas has released the 20 living hostages and Israel freed 2,000 Palestinians. 250 of them were serving life sentences. Trump has called this a new era of harmony in the Middle East, but it's not just the truce. This is a centerpiece of Trump's new Middle East vision, an ambitious plan that he claims will end one of the world's longest, bloodiest conflicts. Remember, what we are seeing play out between Hamas and Israel over the Gaza Strip didn't start on the 7th of October 2 years ago. It started 75 years ago, and it dates back to before that. Continuous bloodshed and continuous occupation in various parts of Palestine. Trump claims to have finally found a solution. Hours after this peace actually came in, Trump landed in Tel Aviv in Israel. He addressed the Israeli Senate and he praised Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, urging the Israeli president to pardon him of corruption charges. He basically called Netanyahu one of the greatest wartime leaders ever, crediting him for achieving what others have failed to do, which is defeating Hamas. From Israel, Trump then flew to Red Sea resort, where he was joined by Egypt's president, Qatar's emir, and Turkey's president to sign what they're calling the Declaration of Peace. Now, this is the new Middle East vision of Trump, right? Standing in front of dozens of world leaders who also came in for what was called the Summit of Peace, or the Gaza Peace Summit in Egypt. And to give you a list of who came in: European Union's president, France's president, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, Spain, Greece, Cyprus, Hungary, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Bahrain, UAE, and the Arab League. All of these various nations were present, and Trump stood before them. He was received with wide applause. He called it an end of age of terror and death and the beginning of an age of faith, hope, and God. And he declared a comprehensive vision of peace, security, and shared prosperity. Now, at its core lies Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza's future. Now, let's take a look at what it says. 1, a complete ceasefire that will be monitored by a multinational force that includes US, Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and the UAE. And you'll remember, if you back up a little bit, of the list that I just called out, many of them have been receiving Trump and rolling out the red carpet for Trump over the last 1 year. Israel retains control of 53% of Gaza initially, but it will withdraw, according to this plan, in 3 phases. If Hamas complies, Gaza will be completely demilitarized, with terror infrastructure completely dismantled. There will be a temporary transitional government of Palestinian technocrats. So basically, people will be appointed to run the government, and it will be overseen by what is being called a board of peace, chaired by Trump himself and co-chaired by Tony Blair, who has sort of made an appearance and come out of retirement just for this. Now, the eventual transfer of power to a Palestinian authority, although it doesn't really make clear who will be on this Palestinian Authority, if they will be democratically elected at all, and what the criteria will be. Hamas will be excluded from all governments and has been offered amnesty or exile if it disarms. And there will be a launch of, and this is the key, Trump's economic development plan, which includes a rebuilding and an investment program designed to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. Remember, Trump shared a video, a very disturbing video of it, about how he was just going to rebuild Gaza into this place that looks a little more like Dubai, that everybody's going to want to live in. When Trump came into Tel Aviv and to Egypt, he was greeted, like a returning Messiah. The crowds were chanting his name. People were wearing red caps that said Trump is the peace president. Netanyahu called him the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. And in that summit, where he was flanked by European leaders and leaders from across the world, Trump actually declared basically that he has changed the world. Egypt's head of state called Trump the region's last chance for peace. And Trump told reporters on Air Force One that this is a historic dawn of the Middle East. So that's the pomp and splendor. That is leaders of the West congratulating each other for drawing in peace. Now let's keep that on one side and look at the other side of what is really going on in Gaza for the people of Gaza and what this peace actually means. Okay, on the ground, it's far from celebratory for Gaza. 67,000 people have died, most of them civilians, majority of them children and women. 90% of the homes have been completely destroyed. 88% of the schools have been completely destroyed. The United Nations is estimating 55 million tons of rubble that will have to be cleared, much of it containing unexploded bombs. A reconstruction bill that could roll into $70 billion and a decade of work, which the people of Gaza cannot afford. Let me also remind you that the people of Gaza now have among them the largest group of amputee children in the world. Children who have been scarred, who are struggling from PTSD, who've lost their limbs, who've lost their parents, who've lost their homes, who've lost their schools. They have lost all social infrastructure, which means that these displaced people have no identification. They have no paperwork. They have no safe place to go to for rehabilitation. There are no prosthetic limbs. There's no road for them to walk on, to roll a wheelchair on. It is just complete and utter destruction. So all that we have right now, which we must be very clear about, is a ceasefire. We don't have peace for the time being. Now Israel, and the reason why that is happening is because Israel insists that Hamas must disarm entirely, something that Hamas is refusing to do. And so if Hamas does not entirely comply, this plan does not go forward. Trump also does not make it very clear who is going to pay for that reconstruction of $70 billion and what Gaza's future government will look like and how it will function. Hamas, for its part, insists that Israel must withdraw fully, and Netanyahu shows no signs of doing it. Let's also remember Israel has pulled back from Gaza City and Khan Yunis, but it controls the southern city of Rafah and much of the border. And so the final phase of withdrawal and reducing control to 15% from the 55-ish% that it has right now is not clearly listed out. Now, apart from this, remember, when we're talking about a Hamas withdrawal that's monitored by a global board, when we're talking about a Palestinian government or an authority that will be appointed by and overseen, so it will be answerable to Western powers. It will not be answerable to its own people. They will not be democratically elected. There is a big question here about Neo-Colonialism, a new form of colonialism. Remember, the people of Gaza have always considered, the Israeli regime to be an occupation. What this means is effectively control goes from Israel to a bunch of Israel's friends. And what does that mean for the people of Gaza? Now, let's take a look at what the criticism is to Trump's plan. Governance imposed from the outside. So the plan effectively envisions Gaza being run temporarily by technocrats who will be supervised by a board of peace chaired by Trump and Tony Blair. Palestinians are largely excluded from any decision making. This resembles a colonial administration rather than a sovereign state. Then sidelining local democracy. The plan has no plan at all, no suggestion of democracy, no clarity on how and when Gazans will be able to choose their own government. This is a transitional committee, is seen as apolitical and overseen by external actors. Like I said, there's no promise of statehood, or there's no clarity on the promise of statehood. So the plan frames Palestinian statehood as an aspiration or a goal rather than a right, saying if you really behave yourself, and we see this sort of play out in the way we want to see it play out, we may consider statehood for you. So it's so far out right now that it's not something that is subject to meeting conditions. So it places sovereignty on probation, and this is normally the way colonial forces operate. Then the question of security and control over territory retained by Israel and by outsiders. So even as Israel is supposed to be withdrawing in phases, the plan allows it to retain control over large parts of Gaza, to maintain security perimeters, and to intervene if it feels there is a threat that exists. And this effectively perpetuates control over Gaza's borders, over its security and the movement of its people. Now the problem of economics, the reconstruction and development components framed as opportunities for foreign capital, privatization and external investment effectively makes the territory a stage for global capital flow. Now this has both positives and negatives. Global capital flow means that there will actually be money that flows into Gaza, there will be a large amount of rebuilding that will happen, but what that will also mean is that the people of Gaza will lose ownership over their own land, something that they have repeatedly said they're willing to give their lives for. An exclusion of Hamas completely. Critics argue by excluding the major stakeholders, what you're doing is removing local power completely. Now, this is a very tricky argument. I'll tell you why. Because Hamas, even though it was democratically elected by the people of Gaza decades ago, and they've not had a democratic election since then, Hamas is seen by the world, by the UN, and by most of the world as a terror organization. So, should Hamas be allowed to continue in Gaza? Should they be asked to leave completely? I think the world is unanimous about the fact that they should be asked to leave completely, especially after the latest attack, October 7th, 2 years ago. But is there a route here for the Palestinian people in Gaza to elect a new government, at least a roadmap saying that at this point there will be an election? Right now, there is no plan. And there's no clear timeline or mechanism of full withdrawal or external oversight. So, for example, this board of peace that is going to be running Gaza effectively and routing money into it, there's no timeline of when these guys will exit at all. There's no mention of that. So, we don't know what that really means. So, what it's saying basically is that given the plan that seems to be bringing peace after 2 years, and peace that's absolutely necessary, it brings in no sign of sovereignty, no sign of legitimacy, no sign of justice or decolonization for the people of Gaza. Now, Trump's plan assumes that Hamas will sort of fade away, and this is criticism of the practical points of the plan. And the Palestinian Authority will sort of rise and govern, but Hamas still has fighters in Gaza, and there are sort of local skirmishes that are now breaking out because Hamas has been weakened and Gaza has been divided. Now, Netanyahu in the meantime is facing a lot of pressure from his far-right coalition to oppose any statehood talk for a Palestinian state. So for now, the world is watching. Trump is basking in the afterglow of his self-declared success. Remember, he just missed the Nobel Peace Prize over the weekend. So one wonders if he's going to keep this up for another year until next year, but he's already calling himself the peace president. Gaza is right now a graveyard. There's no other way to describe it. I have another conversation on this channel with a nurse who worked in Gaza in the MSF field hospital, who tells us horror stories of what it looks like. Buildings, dreams, trust, hope, all crushed. And even if the bombs have stopped falling, occupation, displacement, despair, pain continues to be a part of daily life. So history tells us in this region, ceasefires don't last very long. Unless, and we don't know what that unless is and how it's going to last any longer. So this is Trump's new Middle East that seems to have brought a moment of quiet. How long this moment of quiet is going to last is something that everyone's holding their breaths to find out. 67,000 people have died. There is blood soaked into the land in Gaza right now. It's in ruins. Netanyahu is vindicated. Trump has had his victory tour. But the world needs to stop applauding for a minute to ask how we allowed this to happen to the people of Gaza as a human race, and how we're going to do better by the people of Gaza going forward, by those children who have lost their limbs, who have lost their parents, who have lost their schools, who have lost their loved ones, who have lost any sign of normalcy. How as a human race we're going to band together to ensure that they have some future to hope for and some love to look forward to. Leave me a comment in the comment section if you believe that Trump's plan is actually going to work out, and to what extent.